Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. This is episode 3 of the mill restoration project, and I wanted to take a few minutes to let you know what kind of progress has happened. The first thing that's happened is the mill has come up off the floor, and that's because of two reasons. One, I got tired of rolling around on the floor, and secondly, it's a whole lot easier to film up here than it is down there. So that's the reason. Since I'm over here, the first thing that I did was put down some tape here on the sill, and I took a bunch of measurements, measuring the distance behind the stone to this upright piece, and also just kind of getting an idea about where things are going to go. The first source was just simply doing measurements on this mill and figuring out where this stone was at, where it was going to meet the other stone, and figuring out how much space I had back here. I need to have enough space back here so that when I back the stone off, when I'm not grinding, I can get the stones far enough apart, but I don't run into the back of this piece here. This metal piece does protrude a little bit further than the back side of the stone, and because this stone isn't flat on the back, it makes measurements a little bit difficult. But the other source that I was using to make this determination was some measurements that I took from a mill over in Virginia, and that mill was complete and original, and the measurements on it were 6.5 wide for the runner stone and 5.5 for that. I've got about 1.25 inches space behind from here to the back of this, and that should be sufficient at any given time, actually. According to the documents, the mill is supposed to run when it's grinding. The stones are supposed to be no more than the width apart, the thickness of a sheet of paper, if that makes sense. So really close together. But I guess that would be like for milling wheat or rye or buckwheat or something like that. Corn, typically you run a little bit further apart. But that's another topic for another day. I do want to make a mention at this time about an error that I made. And the error came into play when I constructed the sills and when I decided on the width of these upright support pieces. And that's where this bracket comes into play at. Now this bracket is supposed to go right there. And it's a support bracket for the back of this, and this piece of kit right here that I've started to paint as well. You can never keep paint on these pieces, by the way. That's how this piece is supposed to go. So the short end here goes through this block and through this hole, and then this piece is actually supposed to have a corresponding slot. You know, there's supposed to be a slot cut in here, and this whips into it and holds this part of the mill together that way. And this is just kind of a quick way of swinging that out of the way, and you can move that out, actually. I discovered that when you put this bracket where it's supposed to go, it is directly in line with this bolt. And that's a problem. So to solve that, I'd have to move this bracket out this way. And that's not necessarily a problem, except there's nothing under it to support it. So I didn't make my bottom sills wide enough. And I really should have thought about this in advance. but I didn't. So don't do what I've done, basically. My solution for this particular problem is to thicken the bottom sill, which I don't think is going to be bad. In fact, I think it'll actually look better when I have thicker sills, because the sills right now kind of look a little bit spindly in comparison to these big blocks that sit on it. So in a grand scheme of things, I think it's actually going to make the mill look a lot beefier and more substantial by adding some pieces here. So not necessarily a bad thing, and this is actually a good time to find this problem when I can fix it easily, because I'm going to take everything apart anyway. And while I'm doing that, I'm actually going to add some cross braces in the sill, just to kind of strengthen it and make it a much more strong and robust undercarriage. Hello everyone, hope you've been doing well. It's been a while since I posted on the mill, but I have been working on it. Mostly what I've been doing is painting and cleaning the metal parts, and as you can see, I've got a really nice glossy black finish on the cast. Very happy with that. It's turned out beautiful. It was a good decision to paint it this color and the glossiness. I have boogered up some of the paint a little bit where I've been messing about with it, so I'll go back and touch that up later. The other thing that I've been doing probably for the past 2 weeks, I only work on this project off and on, and is really getting the mill set and balanced and making sure that all the bearings are at the correct height so that it will turn halfway decently. And it turns pretty good. It is got a little bit of a resistance to it, but it's not too bad. That may be because I've only just been squirting a little bit of oil in the bearings as I need it. So the bearings are not completely oiled, or they don't have a constant supply of oil, is what I should say. However, I have noticed a few challenges that I'm going to have to work around going into the next steps. Some of the woodwork, I think I've mentioned this before, I'm not the best woodworker in the world, and so I've discovered a few errors, but I know about those, and so I should be able to compensate as I move forward. Really what I've been working on is this end of the mill, getting this bearing cap where it's supposed to be and set so that it supports this end of the mill. So I've got some clamps in place to hold it down. I've got it spaced where I want it, and what I've noticed is this side is a little bit lower than this side. So I've been spending some time trying to figure out what the cause of that is. One theory is the sill on this side of the mill up here is ever so slightly lower than this side of the mill. Or this side could be slightly higher than that side, possibility. When I say slightly, it's approximately, give or take, about a 1/16 of an inch out. So it's kind of like that a little bit. And you can see I've got this plate here. And initially I had created this plate to go completely under this bearing because it looked at first that there was a big gap. So then I took that out, bolted it down, and discovered that no, there actually isn't a big gap under this, and that everything worked out just fine. Further investigation showed the discrepancy between the sides. And at first I had this plate under the block at the bottom, and now I've decided that I think I'm going to move it up here, because I actually believe that the bottom of this cast piece isn't completely flat. In fact, I know it's not flat. You can tell it by looking at it. So I do think that it's a little irregular under here, and that this side of the cap is a little bit lower than this side of the cap. That's at least where I'm working from right now and how I'm going to move forward. And so I'm going to take this plate that I made, cut it down so that it will fit under this side of the cap. And it's going to be the entire width of that. So it should support it really well. Much better than if I just stuck a washer under it. That would probably not work too well. So that's kind of where I'm at. Where I'm going is the next step, next phase of the process, which is to actually make the boxes for the mill. And the first one I'm going to make is actually going to be for the runner stone side. And as I mentioned, I've got the distance here set where I want it, which I'm running a little over, I think it's 11¼ inches is what I've got. Nice round numbers. And from the face of this stone to the internal face of this block, this one right here, so from here to here, is 6 inches. And that's how wide this box is going to be, or deep, depending on how you want to look at it. This box, there's actually a little bit of flexibility, I think, but I'm going to build this box first and see how everything works out. And then I'm going to focus on building this box. And we'll talk about that when I go to build that box. There's some minor differences between the design of the runner stone box and the bedstone box, but it's incredibly minor, and I'll go over that when we get to that point. Now I'm going to take you over to my little work desk that I've got here and show you what I've been doing for the past 2.5 days. The light in here is probably terrible, and you probably can only see just a big white sheet of paper in front of me. However, this is a large piece of poster board that I've spliced together. And what it is a full-size drawing of the box that I'm going to create for this mill. So I began with drawing out the circles which represent the stone. So this inner circle represents the outer diameter of the actual stone itself. This next line represents the outer diameter of that little metal bit that I showed you. There's a band with that little metal piece on it. And so this line represents that maximum diameter. This third largest circle is actually my cut line. And this is the size that the hole is actually going to be, which I think is 16, 17 inches wide in diameter, actually. But I've got all the major components laid out here in where they're supposed to go. And there'll be a big chunky block at the top, another big chunky block at the bottom, and then 2 sides that come up this way. And I'm going to get everything together, oriented, how it's supposed to go, then cut this circle. And over here I have drawn the exit spout, and this is where the product is going to come out of the mill at, in this area. Effectively, this is how both sides are going to be constructed. I know there's a lot of lines on here, and probably some of them don't make a whole lot of sense, but this is really what I've spent the past 2.5 days on, and I'm really proud of this, and I think this is going to work out really, really well for me in the construction of this project. You know, it's going to give me reference points in building this this mill. So I'm really excited about what I've done so far. It's been a labor of love to do this, and I don't think it's perfect. So hopefully it's good enough that it will allow me to construct these boxes. Now this is some of the old wood that was in the mill to begin with, and I've nailed it back together just to kind of give you all sort of a visualization of some kind of what I'm actually going to make. Now, my dimensions are going to be a little bit different, and we can kind of go into that now. Just the way that things are working out, the bottom section actually has to be a bit thicker than this, simply because that's how I put things together. So I will have these bits down at the bottom, but overall this does give you at least a visualization right now of kind of what the finished product is actually going to look like.